Okay, so I'm going to try to do some brief presentations on World War II. We'll start with the European theater. The background of it is that by about mid-1930s, the fascist powers had risen in Italy and Germany, in Europe, and then in Japan, same story, and they started to become aggressive, which is part of the fascist philosophy, survival of the fittest, strongest man on top, sort of thing. The Italians were the first ones to kind of take it to war. In their first conquest, or the first country they attacked, was Ethiopia. The Italians attacked Ethiopia for a couple of reasons. The first one is part of being a fascist is you have to be militaristic and aggressive to kind of justify your position. And oftentimes you'll pick on a country that's weaker, and Ethiopia hit the mark on both occasions. Then thirdly, I guess, and also kind of importantly, is most of the other European powers, Germany, France, Britain, had African and Asian imperial territories, and Italy didn't. So they wanted to get into the imperial territory game. Ethiopia was one of the few countries in Africa that was not under some other European power. Ethiopia was a country in Africa that was not, developed technologically. Ethiopia was a place that the Italians felt like they could go in, be aggressive, get part of the African territory, be part of the in crowd as far as the European powers were going at the time, and they kind of fit the bill there. The Italians, took Ethiopia relatively easily. There are some pretty amazing photographs of the Italians attacking Ethiopia, and one of the most amazing photographs is you see the Italian fighter jet, or not jet, but a fighter plane kind of going over the top of Ethiopian warriors who are using, technology that's definitely not modern day. But what's so striking about the photograph is that it shows the bravery of the Ethiopians in the face of really overwhelming technological advantage by the Italians. But at the end of the day, Italy took Ethiopia, and that was kind of their first conquest in this war era. Second thing we're going to touch on is the Spanish Civil War that was started in 1936. Spanish Civil War is super important. I'm not going to do a ton on it because we're going to do more later with projects, but the Spanish Civil War was kind of like the scrimmage before World War II. The two sides that fought in the Spanish Civil War were the Republicans and then the fascists. The fascists were supported by the Catholic Church, the military, the police, and the rich folks. So that was, the one side, the fascist side. And then the Republican side was kind of more of a socialist view of things. And they were supported by, working class people, intellectuals. They actually won the election in 1936 to take over the Spanish government. And that's what kind of precipitated the fascists to attack them. And so the nuts and bolts of it are that a general, Francisco Franco, came from Morocco, where he was stationed at the time, and attacked Spain and got rid of the legitimate government, got rid of the legitimate elected Republican government. And this war took place over 3 years, and there was a lot of foreign interference. The Soviets, a lot of liberal thinking Americans and Brits and French folks supported the Republican side, the kind of socialist side. And then obviously the fascist side was supported by Mussolini, but it was also mostly supported by Hitler and the Germans, who tried out a lot of weapons and tactics that they would use later in World War II. So it was really kind of the beginning of World War II, in the sense that the sides were lined up, the socialists and the democratic capitalists versus the fascists, and they fought it out. And at the end of the day, Francisco Franco won. with his support by the Nazis, and kind of established a fascist government in Spain. And we'll talk more about that later. In 1938, in 1936 also, Germany started to flex its muscles a little bit again in Europe, and it took back this territory called the Rhineland. The Rhineland was a kind of buffer zone that was established after World War I to make sure that there was no German kind of presence between the border of Germany and France. And when Germany marched into the Rhineland in 1936, it was really kind of testing the waters to see if the French and the Brits would support the Treaty of Versailles. So, in a sense, by taking the Rhineland, Germany remilitarized the border with France. But the thing that's kind of more important about Rhineland is it was Hitler kind of, putting his chin out and seeing if anybody was going to knock him back. And to his, surprise and probably joy, the Brits and the French did not uphold the Treaty of Versailles, and they allowed him to go into the Rhineland. And the reason why probably has a lot to do with the fact that the war, World War I, had been over for, almost a generation. But secondly, the Brits and the French had to deal with a lot of their own internal problems because of the worldwide economic depression. So in a sense, they kind of took their eye off the ball by allowing Hitler to go into the Rhineland, which further emboldened him and made him kind of see how far he could push before they would actually start to push back and hold up their end of the Treaty of Versailles, which, is another story altogether, because in a lot of ways, the Treaty of Versailles was sort of cruel, or it was in fact cruel to the Germans after World War I, in a lot of ways. On the other hand, I guess later on, maybe some of what they laid out in the Treaty of Versailles was, necessary because of the aggressive nature of Germany at the time. Who knows? But again, we'll talk about that later. In 1938, Germany takes Sudetenland, which is the border of Czechoslovakia. Sudetenland was just another buffer zone that was set up so that the Germans couldn't remilitarize next to their old enemies. And then they took part of Czechoslovakia. They also took Austria. There was no resistance to the Germans' attacks, or not attacks, the Germans' occupations of Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, and Austria. And if you guys are fans of musicals, this is The Sound of Music, right? This is where the Nazis go into Austria, and a lot of the Austrians kind of acquiesce and go along with the Nazi occupation without resisting. Part of the reason why, or probably a lot of the reason why, these territories did not rise up against the Nazis was, number one, he kind of appealed to their, Germanic roots. Number two, they were in really difficult situation economically, and they were kind of looking for a solution, which Hitler promised them. And I guess number three, they had been kind of batted around for 15 years or so more, without any real direction. And sometimes even when a dictator provides direction, it's much more appealing to a lot of people than to kind of be wandering loose throughout the world without any real system. Okay. And then finally, in 1938, we have the Munich Pact. The Munich Pact is something that's always referred to still. I heard it referred to on the radio the other day when I was driving into school. This is when the British, the French, went to meet with Hitler in Munich, and they decided that Hitler could keep Sudetenland, Rhineland, Czechoslovakia, and Austria as long as he promised to not be aggressive or occupy any more territory in the name of Germany. And obviously, Hitler promised to do this with no intention of upholding it. But after the Munich agreement, after this Munich meeting, the British Prime Minister at the time, Neville Chamberlain, his quote was possibly one of the most, ironic of all time, where he left Munich and shaking hands with Hitler, and Hitler agreeing not to attack any more countries. Chamberlain said, "We have achieved peace in our time," which obviously was not the case. The Germans used the Munich Pact as a way to kind of build their policies and their army and their war machine up over the next year, and then jump right into World War II when they invaded Poland more aggressively. But that'll be the first